Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tuesday, September 28th edition of the RotoWire NFL podcast brought to you by WynnBET. I'm Joe Bartle, and unlike most weeks, I am joined by my good friend John McKechnie of the Thursday show, hopping over into the Tuesday edition to talk some waiver wire pickups for me. Obviously, Jake is gone right now, has some personal matters to attend to, so I'm happy that John was able to step in today.
It's good to be on with you, Joe. It's been a while since we've done a pod together, and this is a nice little change of pace. The Tuesday, the waiver wire, the week that is still fresh. We got the Monday nighter to talk about, a lot to get into there, the waiver wire situation, I feel like through the first couple of weeks has been a little bit strange this year compared to others. Yeah. I feel like we've had less of those league-changing type of pickups. I guess we'll see what happens with Chuba Hubbard and, of course, the McCaffrey injury, however long he's out. But, yeah, it doesn't feel like they're – like, even Elijah Mitchell a couple weeks ago was kind of just inflated, right? Like, if he's drawing 60, 65% of someone's fab budget, it's just because it felt like there was no one else out there. So you just kind of had to splash the pot on him specifically. That's obviously not aging super well. But, yeah, I just feel like in general we've been – kind of handed it an interesting assortment of free agent pickups of varying levels of usefulness so far.
You've foreshadowed what's going to be the main topic for today. Obviously, Chuba Hubbard and what you want to spend from a fab budget perspective or waiver wire priority. I think Elijah Mitchell was a top pickup for a reason, and maybe some people had some premature fabulation happening on with that, and obviously the injuries and stuff impact.
Have you said that before?
I had to really say it slowly to not make it difficult. No, that's the first time I said premature fabulate. Yeah.
I don't know if that's better or worse than what Eli did on national TV last night
with the double finger salute,
the double birds.
That was great, and honestly, that's a good leaping point to at least the Monday night game, which was more or less a laugher. Obviously, the Cowboys dominated from beginning to end. I think the final score is 34-14. I'll be honest, John, when I say I watched this game sparingly, it's the truth. And we've talked about a lot with Jake on the show as well, too. New father, my son, a little bit sick the past 2 weeks and has been, yesterday, too, had a cold. Like before it was RSV, which is a different thing. Hopefully nobody out there listening has to know what that means because I'm not going to be medical doctor you right now. But a little bit of a cold, so we were like taking care of him, and I'm like passively watching in the background up. And this is the first time I watched the Manning broadcast as well, too. But he can't have it on loud because he's trying to sleep. So I can only hear like half the things they're saying. It was a little bit of a mess. So when I say I didn't watch as much as I could have, I think it's okay because it was more or less a blowout in this contest.
Yeah, I mean, it was – so hand up, I was on the Eagles +4. I thought that betting against the Cowboys was a good idea. I still think it is in general, but betting on the Eagles, it turns out, not a good idea. So, I mean, that game wasn't even as close as the score would suggest. It ends up being 41-21. There was a garbage time touchdown from Jalen Hurts to Greg Ward at the very end, which salvaged Jalen Hurts' fantasy day a little bit, which was nice because I know, right? I had to price enforce and you got stuck with him. And yeah, it's not great. But you look at the rest of that game, and it's close early, but it's only because of some fluky stuff. I mean, Dak Prescott gets kind of hit in the end zone, pops up, and Fletcher Cox catches it for a touchdown. So all of a sudden the Eagles are back in business. And then because the Eagles had just turned the ball over to kind of put the Cowboys in that position. And then the Eagles also somehow managed a goal line stand as well. So, I mean, it could have been just as easily 21-0 as it was 14-7 in favor of the Cowboys early on. So as the game dragged on, really, you started to get the real sense of how the game was going. And if you were on the Cowboys -3.5, then you were feeling good pretty much the whole way through. It was a pretty thorough beating, I would say, on both sides of the ball. The Eagles' offense, I felt like, just didn't look viable. And that's not great when you're going up against a Cowboys defense that I don't think anyone would argue is one that you should be struggling against, at least to that degree, especially without DeMarcus Lawrence. So, that thing, I think it's like soul searching time for the Eagles already, whereas like the Cowboys, just kind of by virtue of their sort of marquee-ness, and you look at the rest of the rest of that NFC East now, and it's like, well, I guess they are the best team in the NFC East. I'm not going to say that that's worth more than it really is, but you got to put them in pole position to win the East at this point.
Absolutely. I think you have to factor in this was the first home game for, I think, Cowboys fans in 2 years, right? I believe they were dealing with everything else that the rest of the NFL was. So the crowd factor plays a part. And I don't think the Eagles are much better than the Cowboys. And I think things got out of hand really early on. So if this game gets played in Philadelphia, and it will obviously, do I think the Cowboys are going to be, again, a 20-point victor? No, I think actually the home field advantage, especially in this situation, one of those first games back from Dallas, national television kind of thing, makes a difference. And I don't actually remember if I was on Eagles or Cowboys. I knew the game was going to be, I thought it was going to be close. And I had no real opinion one way or another. So to see it go down like that, I think it's more so Cowboys aren't that good. Eagles aren't that bad. Let's see what happens as we get later towards the season. So, right. I mean, that's my opinion, at least on this.
I think the Eagles might be that bad. I think that they have no clear plan as far as their run game is concerned. This isn't even me as like a jilted Miles Sanders investor. I have 0 shares of Miles Sanders, but you should give him the ball more than twice.
Right.
I'm just going to say that out loud. Come on now. He can run the ball at least. You give him the ball twice, he picks up 27 yards. That seems like something you should go back to, especially with the way that they're struggling in the pass game. Obviously, Zach Ertz came back, and Dallas Goedert, he had a drop, but was otherwise pretty solid, I thought, last night. Devonte Smith seems to be working through some growing pains. I think some of the concerns that we might have had about him and his pro prospects, the fact that he's just as skinny as he is, once you start throwing a bunch of jams and pressing him off the line, he might not be as effective, and that's kind of bearing out. And then Jalen Reagor, just another disappearing act from him. So I mean, it's just a weird mix there of skill guys, and I don't know if the offense really has a cohesive thesis behind it. And Jalen Hurts, I think that the physical tools are there, and occasionally, he's able to do things like he did late in the season last year. But now that we've had an off season for people to get tape on him, I'm just starting to wonder how long that this lasts. If he has another night or another couple games like this one, then I think the Gardner Minshew noise probably starts to come out a little bit. So we'll see what happens there. I'm not completely pushing the eject button on Jalen Hurts by any means, but that last night I think was a confidence shaking type of incident, type of game to point to if you're trying to doubt him.
Interesting. Well, I don't want to spend too much more time on a game that was kind of laughable throughout. 2 other main talking points. The demise of Ezekiel Elliott seems to be greatly exaggerated, right? There was 2 rushing touchdowns. Tony Pollard only got 11 carries to Zeke 17. Zeke got nearly 100 yards on the ground, obviously over, I think it was close to 120 total. He looked pretty darn good. Tony Pollard was relevant as well. And I know in past waiver wire shows, not ours, because Pollard has never went under the 50% roster threshold, but others have mentioned Pollard as top pickup. I've never been concerned about Zeke. I thought in week 1, the fact that he was out there trying to pass block against the Buccaneers as much as he was a positive sign. And now to see him both getting involved on the ground and through the air, good. I mean, that's one of the first weeks where you're happy to have Zeke as a first round pick. But I think by the end of this season, he is going to be a top 10 fantasy running back. And those who are concerned about the workload, pump the brakes a little bit, right?
Yeah, I think so. And, as someone who was definitely concerned about Zeke after 2 weeks, someone who, I was close to setting the min on him in a couple spots. I think I've reached as high as 4 to get him in a best ball or 2. So definitely was shook those first couple of weeks, but loved the usage last night. Get him the ball near the goal line, just let him burrow his way into the end zone. And he's still great at that. So I'll take those touchdowns. And yeah, he was efficient. He looked springy, spry, all the reports about him being in particularly good shape this year relative to years past seem to be true. He does look a little bit lighter on his feet, but he's still delivering that classic Zeke thump on top of it as well. So the arrow is definitely trending upwards again after some slow start out of the gate, fair to say.
Other portion of this is Dalton Schultz 6 catches, 2 touchdowns, 80 yards. Probably a guy from a tight end perspective, especially if you have tight ends 6 through 14 that were being drafted. Maybe Kyle Pitts throws in that equation too, that you might want to consider having to pick up at this point. I've been a huge Blake Jarwin stan. I still believe him as a talent, but the fact that Dalton Schultz now is continuing to be involved in that offense, even with Blake Jarwin healthy, is A, difficult for me. I think Jarwin at this point is a drop unless you're in deeper leagues, but B, will complicate things in most situations for Schultz in future weeks. Or am I reading this wrong? I mean, is Schultz a guy that you might want to start from a tight end 1 perspective at points this season?
I mean, the tight end 1 thing is such a moving target. I mean, when it comes to what we're looking at for this offense, Schultz out-snapping Jarwin 150 to 118. So that's a 32 snap difference over 3 games. So about 10 snaps per game. And Schultz has been super efficient with the targets that he has gotten, but so has Jarwin. Jarwin's caught 8 of 9 targets for 71 yards. Schultz obviously was the guy that kind of stood out last night with his ability to score a couple of touchdowns. Ends through 3 weeks, 14 catches for 143 and 2 scores on 15 targets. So whenever Dak goes to the tight end, it ends up being a positive play, and it's an efficient call, it seems like. I just think that there's going to be a volume cap for these tight ends, whether it is Schultz or whether it is Jarwin. I do lean to the idea of Schultz, at least at this stage. How can you not after last night? But I don't think that there's going to be too many other nights where CeeDee Lamb has 3 catches and Amari Cooper has 3 catches. We're going to get Michael Gallup back eventually, and Cedric Wilson even caught a touchdown last night. So it was just a weird confluence of things going on that the Cowboys found a way to use a bunch of guys that they didn't really or haven't in the past in order to beat the Eagles last night. But if they needed CeeDee Lamb and Cooper to do something last night, I'm sure they would have been able to. Right. It's just kind of the way that the game broke. So if you're a Lamb or a Cooper investor, obviously a little bit frustrating, but I think Schultz is definitely on the radar. I think you like him more than like an Adam Troutman right now or something like that. But, I think that unless you have one of those top tight ends right now, you're just kind of hoping either way. And I think Schultz at least has like the viable case behind him playing in that offense and obviously having the couple of touchdowns last night. That might be enough.
Yeah. It's interesting. My 80% roster rate of George Kittle, Mark Andrews, and TJ Hawkinson of my 15 leagues has me feeling pretty good. So I'm like living in this fairy tale land where I don't have to worry about tight end ever. But we'll circle back to Dalton Schultz and where he relates to a few of the other guys. It's actually kind of a deeper waiver wire podcast for tight end and certainly wide receiver too. You mentioned Chuba Hubbard. He's going to be a major talking point as well. And maybe we can run back Sam Darnold again as the 4th consecutive week where he makes appearance on this podcast. Before we get to all that though, let's get a word from our sponsors, WynnBET. If there's one thing we appreciate here at RotoWire, it's making good decisions. And even more so, making the right decision. Listen up, folks. I have an incredible offer for you with RotoWire's newest partner, WynnBET, the premier digital casino and sportsbook app. WynnBook is now the exclusive sponsor for RotoWire's fantasy podcast. WynnBET brings you all the latest action with a user-friendly interface, moneyline bets, boosted parlays, over-unders, round robins, live betting, and so much more right at your fingertips. If you want a break from sports betting, head into WynnBET's digital casino and take a spin on roulette, double down, and blackjack. You can slam the slots or try your hand at baccarat. WynnBET is currently available in 6 states: Colorado, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Tennessee, and Virginia, while rapidly expanding. At WynnBET, the possibilities are limitless. WynnBET is currently offering all RotoWire listeners a risk-free bet up to $500 on your first wager. Download WynnBET now. That's WYNNBET. WynnBET, the exclusive partner for RotoWire's fantasy podcast. While we're here, let's also get a word from our sponsors, Blue Wire. Okay, so we're back. Let's talk about quarterbacks for a second. Last week, we were in on Daniel Jones, Derek Carr, Teddy Bridgewater, and Sam Darnold. Honestly, of those, Daniel Jones was the most disappointing. Obviously, Derek Carr had another 350-plus yard game. Teddy Bridgewater did fine enough. And Sam Darnold, with his 2 rushing touchdowns, was pretty darn good. It was Daniel Jones in what should have been a great match against the Falcons that struggled. I think this week, from a streaming quarterback perspective, do you run back Sam Darnold again? We just saw the Cowboys eviscerate that Eagles offense on Monday Night Football. Can Sam Darnold, without Christian McCaffrey, do comparably well against this Cowboys defense?
I think I do like Darnold's setup for this week. I do think at the end of the day that Carolina offense is way better designed than whatever the heck Philadelphia is running out there. I think that Darnold is a super talented guy. I was not ready to give up on him after the shaky couple of years in New York. It looks like he's kind of tapped back into things as far as that potential is concerned. Having no McCaffrey, it definitely stings, but it also kind of makes the offense less contingent on the running back, and it allows Darnold to operate more as a passer. So I like, his ability to facilitate and kind of have the game on his shoulders as opposed to, when McCaffrey's back there demanding 30 touches or whatever. So I like Darnold's chances this week of doing well. Obviously, the Cowboys have some studs on the defensive side of the ball. Micah Parsons looks promising. Trevon Diggs looks like an unbelievable corner. Had another pick six last night. I think he's had a pick in every game so far this year or something like that. So he's crazy, but those are just individual pieces. I still think that defense in Dallas is maybe not as bad as it was a year ago, but certainly not like the greatest thing in the world. So I think Darnold is definitely streamable this week. Is he top 14 necessarily? Yeah, he's like right on that fringe probably, but I think if he's still out there, I'm picking him up over like a Baker Mayfield, I would say.
That was good. I was going to ask you, I mean, like Baker's got the Vikings this week, which might be a serviceable matchup, but I'm thinking maybe on the lines of, I don't know. Do you want to play Bridgewater against the Ravens is not a question. I'll play Darnold over Bridgewater, but Bridgewater was already a streaming option anyway. Roethlisberger against the Packers defense, you'd maybe consider Roethlisberger. At the same instance, he's been so bad. It's like, it's the movable object against the horrible quarterback. Which one ends up doing worse, the Packers, or which one does better, the Packers defense or Roethlisberger? I have no idea. And you're probably playing Tom Brady against the Patriots too. I think this week, the top options at quarterback, you're not really fading. There's none of those guys. So if there is a streamer that you're really considering, it's more along the lines of 2 QB formats. And I think that's where Sam Darnold was probably being played anyway. You're right. Is he QB 14? Close, but I think you can make a comparison for a lot of those guys.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of a mishmash once you get past Rodgers. I mean, like you get like your Tannehill, your Cousins, Baker, Burrow, Darnold, like all those guys kind of interchangeable, matter of preference type of thing. So, Tannehill probably against the Jets might win out just based on matchup as far as the streaming is concerned. But I think Darnold is definitely in that consideration, and certainly, this is waiver wire, but I think DFS, you could do worse probably.
Oh, I think that's a good conversation because, again, if you're considering Darnold, it's really in the fringe area. I think most of these top guys are pretty automatic plays. Very obvious QB2, but I think, again, for leagues out there that have 2 QB formats or a super flex, Taylor Heineke against that Falcons defense, we recommended Daniel Jones last week. Didn't do as great as we were anticipating. Taylor Heineke, I think, has been uneven thus far through his 2 majority actions of play this in the season. I think I like him. I certainly like Terry McLaurin. I mean, like that's a guy that you're hoping really does well this week. And if he doesn't, some concerns lie there. I don't know. What's your thoughts overall on Heineke as a possible super flex play this week?
Yeah, he's someone that I think he has some really intriguing parts to his game. He's got a lot of moxie, a lot of chutzpah, the kind of stuff that you say about a guy that's probably not all that toolsy, but is fun to watch regardless. He can move around a little bit. He can make plays happen out of nothing. The Falcons defense, I do think, is bad. I think the Giants offense just kind of outbatted how bad the Falcons defense was a week ago. So there's something to be said for that. I think that Heineke, if you rush to pick him up after the Giants game a week ago, you shouldn't jump ship so quickly after a bad game in Buffalo, against arguably the team to beat in the AFC. So I think going up against the Falcons should be a much easier go for Heineke. If it's not, then you can go ahead and move along with whatever else you need to do roster wise. But I would still hang on to Heineke if you went ahead and picked him up this time a week ago.
We got a good question from Lucas. He's got Terry McLaurin and Antonio Gibson. Is it worth flipping Antonio Gibson for James Robinson straight up? Now, at least some context for this, obviously a great matchup against the Falcons. If you were to trade Gibson, I think you should do it after this matchup against the Falcons. However, the Washington football team actually has one of the hardest schedules, at least for running backs, the rest of the way. So I think there is a conversation to be made for Gibson, especially if he's splitting workload with J.D. McKissic as a trade. I had a friend earlier today also ask, should I trade Gibson straight up for Jonathan Taylor? I think there's a conversation that could be made, but any trades from me, at least from Antonio Gibson's perspective, need to be made after this Falcons game, because if he has 20-plus points, I think that's almost a given. Not a given, but he sure looks like a favorable spot against the Falcons defense this week.
No, that's a good point. So you'll have to see if it's an expiring offer. I'm sure the guy that wants Gibbo definitely would like to have him against the Falcons as well. So you might need to use that leverage a little bit to see if you can get a little bit more. But when it comes to, I feel like maybe the crux here, and maybe I'm reading it wrong, but if you have Terry McLaurin and Antonio Gibson, maybe he's looking to diversify his offensive shares a little bit. I'm not so worried about it, because you still, at the end of the day, have the number one options both in the backfield and at receiver for a given team. That's not the worst thing in the world. So I wouldn't trade Gibson based on that, and certainly not take what I believe to be a lesser player just a bit. I mean, I like James Robinson a lot, and I was worried after those first 2 weeks. I feel a lot better now, but I still don't think that Robinson quite measures up to Gibson 1-to-1 to where I would make that deal.
Yeah, I tend to agree as well too. And you mentioned the number one option, whether it be a receiver or runner. Do you want any number one options besides Chark for an Urban Meyer offense? I don't. I was so in on Trevor Lawrence. He's probably my most rostered player across all my leagues, and I couldn't have been more wrong. And it's not me that's wrong. It's just Urban Meyer. That's where I'll put all the blame on there from an analysis perspective, right? We know what we're talking about with Trevor Lawrence. Us guys sitting here in the computer, not coaching players. It's Trevor Lawrence. It's amazing. Urban Meyer is dumb. And I get a little bit worried that I'm investing even more into a guy that I think could be one of the worst coaches. And thankfully, Adam Gase has been around for as long as he was, because I think he'll never lose that crown. Urban Meyer's trying. He's really trying his best to get to that point.
Yeah, the candle that burns twice as brightly burns twice as quickly. So I think Urban is a more spectacular failure, whereas Gase is like this consistent slow burn of terrible. I mean, not that he wasn't explosively terrible at any one point, but seems like Urban's got a little special something as far as how bad it's going for him and the Jags thus far. That basically your biggest pessimist on how this would go is completely vindicated so far, and maybe even not enough.
I think you're going to be able to sell Antonio higher after this week. Like Lucas had followed up saying he was trying to get Javonte Williams. You and I are both a little bit lower on Javonte Williams. I think most people are. I would feel like that's a downgrade, regardless of what you think Williams will be at the end of the season. There's going to be a high point, like a watershed mark for Gibson, and I think it's going to be after this Washington. Again, he has one of the against this Falcons team, he has one of the higher or worst schedules. Entering week 5 and onwards. Keep that in mind. Let's move over to the running backs. Again, there wasn't much from a quarterback perspective, and frankly, not a lot from the running backs either. We had talked about James White, Peyton Barber a little bit, Cordell Patterson as well too, and Alexander Madison. I don't know if you realize this, John, because we play in so many different leagues. Madison was available, or was only rostered in 33% of Yahoo leagues prior to last week. I thought that was astounding, and he was one of those yeah, of course you pick him up if he's available, regardless if Dalvin Cook's out or not. Of course, Cook was out. Madison looked great. Now we don't know what's going to happen with Cook this past week. Madison is skyrocketed from a roster rate. Not worth talking much more about that. We do have Chuba Hubbard, though, and I think that's going to be probably the main conversation for most of these waiver wire podcasts out there. So it's not a question of do you pick him up. I think the question is, how much do you spend from a waiver wire perspective, whether it is the top waiver wire priority or from a free agent budget? And I'm curious your thoughts, because I know I have some, I think, differing than a lot of our other colleagues out there in the fantasy sports industry.
I'm not diving in with both feet on Hubbard. I think that he's someone that you can go up to maybe 20-25% of your free agent budget, but I'm not going more than that. And this is coming from a guy who I think put 62% on Elijah Mitchell. So maybe that makes
you were the premature fabulation guy. Gotcha.
100%. Yeah. Still refracting from it. And when you come to this thing on Chuba Hubbard, I don't think McCaffrey's going to be out for that long. I think he's going to be out for a while. Obviously, the hamstring injury, star player, guy who the Panthers have so much invested in. They're going to make sure that he's, and having gone through last year, they're going to make sure that he's fully good to go when he comes back. So we have a few weeks here, a window in which Hubbard's going to be valuable. And I think it's a different conversation for people that have McCaffrey versus people who just want to pick up the RB or waiver wire du jour. And I think that Hubbard, I just don't necessarily think that he's like even Mike Davis from a year ago. I don't think I really don't. I think I probably think that Mike Davis is better than most people do, but at the same time, I just think that Hubbard, the way he finished his college career, kind of with a dud.
I was going to say that, yeah.
I just, I got some reservations on him. So I mean, like, I'll do a keep him honest bid, of course, and like I definitely wouldn't mind having the starting running back for an offense that's good. For even if it's just for a few weeks, that's useful stuff, especially if you're hurting at running back. But I'm not going over 30%. Like I'm tapping out at 25%.
So he was a top prospect. I mean, you're our college guy, and Hubbard was one of the top guys. And then the year before, I guess last year, didn't look very great. Stock goes down, falls to this point. Prior to that, would it have been wrong to say he was considered a second or third round prospect at minimum prior to his last year in college?
I would have put it, and ETN had a similar thing, but he obviously ended up going in the first round. But it would have been very interesting discussion if we had Jonathan Taylor, Chuba Hubbard, and Travis Etienne, because I think those would have constituted the top three in the 2020 draft class. And Swift would have been, close behind, but fourth. And then, CEH, obviously the guy who ended up going first of that group, would be below them. So, Hubbard definitely had an unbelievable 2019 season and just was kind of unable to follow it up, unfortunately. And, if he struck while the iron was really hot, then I think that he could have been a second round pick. But, hate to see those kind of trajectories.
Obviously falls to the fourth round now. And here's my thought. So I avoided the Elijah Mitchell. I mean, we were saying here, let's go 30, 35% thinking, hey, it's week one. Do not invest all of your budget into one player. Obviously we were completely wrong. Like we give expert analysis and opinions every week. I felt bad because people listen to this podcast think, oh, I don't need to go aggressively in on Mitchell. I would have wanted him. Hindsight being what it is, looking at that Niners offense, you want the starting guy there. I thought 30 to 35% would be what it takes to win him. That wasn't the case. So I felt like we were wrong in the analysis here. I don't want to miss Hubbard. I really don't. And if I have to go 45, 50%, I think that's the play. Okay. You mentioned two things that's important to me. A, McCaffrey, we don't know how long he's going to be out, but his injury history from last year is important. The Panthers are 3-0. They're kind of situated a nice spot in the NFC South where that division's not very good. The Saints, not very good. Buccaneers going to win the Super Bowl. Fine. But other than that, you got the Panthers that can walk in as a 5, 6, 7 seed and I think be competitive so long as Sam Darnold continues to do what we've seen thus far. Their schedule's pretty easy too. If you have McCaffrey out and saying, hey, we're playing for the postseason, let's make sure this is right. You have Hubbard against the Cowboys. I think it's a good matchup. Eagles the following week in week 5. Okay. As a 2-week start, if you're saying he's just starting that way, 25, 30% of your budget. I, as somebody that's going to be going at more 35, 40, 45%, think it's longer. And if it is longer, you got the Vikings, Giants, Falcons of the next 3 weeks. That's a pretty sizable 5-week advantage where you're saying Hubbard is going to be at minimum a running back 2. And that's where I'm fine. You don't get those off the waiver wire very often. And again, in most situations, he's probably available. He's rostered in only 26% of Yahoo leagues. If you're in a 10-team league right now, no, I think I'm like you and being a little bit less aggressive, but in 12-team, 14, anything else like that. I'm going pretty aggressively high because I think we have a running back 2 for at least the next 3 weeks, maybe to a month.
Okay. Right on.
The other at least running back worth mentioning was Peyton Barber, who had 100 plus yards rushing again with Josh Jacobs out for a second consecutive week, had the touchdown as well too. It seems like Jacobs is turning closer to returning. Peyton Barber is what we think Peyton Barber is, but it was in a nice offense that's now been generating tons of production, and Derek Carr is an early MVP favorite, which feels almost gross to say, but it is where we're at right now in the 2021 timeline. Do you like Peyton Barber as like a guy that you can spend $2 to $3 on, thinking if Jacobs were to get injured again, he has a little bit of an injury history through his career, could be a guy that you can start as like a running back 4 or 5 on your bench the rest of the way?
Yeah, when you put it in the $2 to $3 context, then I'm more in on this idea. But it's crazy to me. Hayden Winks, the guy that writes for Underdog, great stuff over there. He tweeted out the very good point that it's like the Raiders made Kenyon Drake like the 15th highest paid running back in football or something this
like
year,
that,
and then you're going ahead and giving Peyton Barber more carry. I mean,
they really needed a pass catching specialist. Jalen Ricard was not doing it for John Gruden.
I mean, well, then use him. Don't use Peyton Barber. I mean, Peyton Barber obviously had maybe the best game of his career against the Dolphins. That's all well and good, but man, I'm not really investing in this one. That this might be I don't even know what a good comp is. Unfortunately, that's on me. But this is just a pop-up blip on the radar type of performance. If he does anything close to this again this year, I will be thoroughly shocked. So
we'll be bringing you on for a guest interview if that's
please.
The case.
I mean, that's totally fine. I'll wear it, but I'll dig my heels in and say that Peyton Barber will not eclipse 111 rushing yards and 140 yards from scrimmage again this season.
I just think of this because we had reports right before we came on air, Adam Schefter, others reporting Marlon Mack and the Colts have agreed to work on a trade. Okay, what's the trade for a third string guy who's on a 1-year deal look like? I don't really know. Maybe 6th or 7th round compensation. The Raiders might be a good landing spot because as much as I think Marlon Mack is an indifferent prospect, he's better than Peyton Barber. So if the situation were to occur where Josh Jacobs does get injured again and you, for whatever reason, can't use the 15th highest paid running back in the league to do things to help your offense, then maybe Marlon Mack works in your favor. In any case, I'm out on Peyton Barber. I think only in really, really deep formats where you're looking at a guy like Barber as a running back 4 or 5 that could walk into your lineup at some point. Great. Otherwise, most people listening, I imagine it's not going to be very helpful for them. The other part of this equation is we don't have a lot of running backs. I mean, Giovanni Bernard from a PPR perspective got a ton of workload. Here's the only problem. Can you project a situation where the Buccaneers are going to be trailing to that extent and having to pass? I mean, this is a team that's going to win the Super Bowl because the NFL will make sure Tom Brady wins a second one.
I like your tinfoil.
No, John, we have to just real quick. I know this is a waiver wire podcast, but when my wife knew Tom Brady had the chance to host the first ever Super Bowl game, she said, Joe, go bet on the Buccaneers to beat the Packers in the NFC Championship game. I said, there's no way. I felt really good about the Packers. I wanted the Buccaneers more than the Saints. And she's like, no, Tom Brady will get there. The NFL will make sure. And she was absolutely dead right. Poor Kevin King got eviscerated by the referees at the end there. You're rolling your eyes. No, if you're not watching the broadcast,
I have more than enough Brady scar tissue to not disagree with a single word you're saying. Yeah.
No, I am for certain. I don't care what. Other than maybe the NFL really wants Los Angeles to go ahead and have a Super Bowl too. That's the other part of the equation with the Rams looking arguably very good. Either way, is there like a week that you could actually say, yeah, the Buccaneers are going to struggle. They're going to have to pass to Giovanni Bernard 10 times. I look at the rest of the season schedule. I don't see a scenario where that occurs. And that's where Giovanni Bernard, even in a PPR league, doesn't make a lot of sense for me to start or pick up.
Yeah. I mean, it's a PPR thing for sure when it comes to Bernard. And even then, I think it's pretty low ceiling. I think he's dealing with a bit of a knee issue. So who even knows what the Bucs are going to do there? And in reality, the Bucs are just such a pass first team that it feels like their running backs are so disposable. I know that Brady has all the history of throwing to his running backs, and he'll do it when he needs to, but does he really need to that much when you have Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Robert Gronkowski, and all these other guys there? I don't necessarily think so. Those guys kind of all seem like spare parts to that offense. They don't really feel like they're going to be consistent week-to-week producers. That's true of Leonard Fournette. That's true of Ronald Jones. So if Bernard's the third of that bunch with a very specialized role within that, count me out.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Let's get to the wide receivers, obviously a healthy group there. Before we do that, a word from our sponsors, Yahoo DFS. The new NFL season is finally here, and Yahoo is excited to kick off daily fantasy football. There'll be a ton of big prized contests throughout the season on Yahoo, including their multi-entry contest now being shark-free. To celebrate the opening of Yahoo Daily Fantasy Football and becoming shark-free, Yahoo's giving all users the opportunity to claim free $10 in contest entry credit. Users can take advantage of this by free $10 contest entry credit to offer to join one of Yahoo's biggest contests, including the $1 million baller contest. The $1 million baller contest features obviously $1 million in total prizes, including first place receiving $100,000 and an entry to the first ever Yahoo Fantasy Football Championship Live Finals event. Yes, that is a mouthful, but it's going to occur at MGM National Harbor in Maryland this December. Play daily fantasy football on Yahoo this season. Visit sports.yahoo.com/dailyfantasy/welcome to claim the free $10 offer to get started. Okay, so we had just talked about last week Rondale Moore, Rashard Higgins, Henry Ruggs. Those three names, not obviously a huge list of options. Henry Ruggs, another really good contest. Rondale Moore, despite DeAndre Hopkins being limited, did almost next to nothing. We'll get to AJ Green in a little bit here. This week, tons of different options. Josh Gordon, Emmanuel Sanders, Kadarius Toney, Bryan Edwards. There's still a possibility Tim Patrick's available in your league. There's a lot of names to go over. And I think what I want from you, John, first is to order, at least rank these guys. We're going to get to the Josh Gordon conundrum in a second. But of the other guys, who are your favorite wide receiver pickups from the top to the bottom? And then we'll kind of go hit by hit on these guys.
I think I would start out with Tim Patrick, especially in light of the Hamler stuff. And then, Jerry Judy's going to be out. So I like him. Number one, I think that Patrick is just like a just perennially underrated guy who all he does is when given the opportunity, he makes something of it. So I like him. Next up would probably be Emmanuel Sanders. I know it can be a little bit tough in an offense with Stephon Diggs to really carve out that
Cole
role.
Beasley.
Yeah. Beasley's getting a ton of work as well, but I still like Sanders a fair bit. So he would be second on my list. I would go Bryan Edwards 3. I like Bryan Edwards. I have a ton of Bryan Edwards shares. So if you're playing in a league with me, he's not on the waiver wire.
You were the original Bryan Edwards stands, as far as I can consider. Pretty
much. I think we can even look back to the NFL mag. I think I scooped him with my last pick or something like that, if I remember correctly. And then
J.K. Dobbins was my first pick in the mag, so I can't really talk about anything positive from that format.
Oh boy, yeah, tough scene there from the Dobbins shares. And then I'd probably go. After that, I would probably go like AJ Green and then maybe Kadarius Toney. But I think I need him to actually show signs of life other than just the fact that the other guys on the Giants are hurt right now. And then, I'll just come up and say I'm not interested in Josh Gordon. We're 8 years removed from him being relevant. It's a good story that he's coming back again and everything. But man, we got to stop chasing that from 8 years ago. Someone's got to stop it.
Okay. I mean, and that's good. I want to get back to Tim Patrick, but everyone's going to be talking about Josh Gordon, so we might as well too. Julia asks not about Josh Gordon signing and his fantasy value. I think Julia's got the right idea, but will that impact Tyreek Hill and Mecole Hardman's fantasy value? I think the former, in Tyreek Hill's instance, very unlikely, but maybe Mecole Hardman sees a little bit less opportunities. I mean, how realistically is it to assume Gordon's going to be out there seeing 30, 40, 50 snaps? I just don't I'm sure he's in shape. We've done this song and dance now for 15 different teams every single year. And he does get some playing time until 2 weeks later, then he's gone. I don't know, it shouldn't impact Hardman, but yet you, again, also being one of the original Mecole Hardman stands, he's been a little bit lackluster this season, sure, despite having the possible workload that we were anticipating for once in his career.
Right. So I think we just look at Hardman as someone who could potentially lose some playing time to this. But, that's also betting that Gordon is going to outperform him. I know that the Chiefs wouldn't go through all the trouble of getting Gordon if they didn't intend on using him once he's ready. So I think, 2-3 weeks down the line, we're going to see him play a healthy amount of snaps in this offense. And that could be at the expense of Hardman, especially if Hardman doesn't produce in the time that he has until Gordon joins the active roster. So if I'm a Hardman investor, which I am in a lot of spots, I am a little bit nervous. I'm a little bit frustrated by this addition. But I think that at the end of the day, Hardman is a better player in the year 2021 than Josh Gordon. And I think that hopefully that the Chiefs will confirm that.
So you're not putting a bid in on Josh Gordon at all?
No. So, I mean, even if I was, there's always the guy that that still thinks that 2013 Browns Josh Gordon is in there, and he's not. But
I made that mistake 2 years ago. Man, it was one of the first times I did Sirius XM, and they made one of those cool graphics afterwards. It's got the sound bites going on. Quotes after, this guy thinks Josh Gordon could be something with the Patriots, and obviously it took 3 games, and that wasn't the case. And I'm like hitting my head like, oh, come on, just that's what I get to be known for, is the guy that was in on Josh Gordon. Okay, so I'm not making that mistake again. But even being burned by that, I'm not interested, honestly. I think that offense is Hill and Kelsey, and that's it. And yet somehow Mahomes throws for 350 yards and 3 touchdowns just about every week. I think Gordon will have some minimal impact. I'm not even necessarily worried about Hardman, although I was less in on him than you were, so I could see where the concern might lie. Let's double back to Tim Patrick, though, because you had mentioned something really crucial. Okay, so Jerry Judy's coming back, maybe possibly next week. The report when the injury came out was Judy's going to be out 4 to 6 weeks. We're on week 2 of his injured reserve stint. Next week, he's technically eligible to play. But either way, Judy's coming back soon. Obviously, Patrick's rise came at the impact of Judy, but now you have KJ Hamler, who likely is out. So even if Judy comes back, you have Cortland Sutton on the other side. I think Tim Patrick still is playing. And to be honest, he's been really good during the times he has been out there. At this point, I don't think the Broncos offense can fade him. And for somebody that's rostered only 23% of the leagues, I like him quite a bit. I'm obviously going in on Chuba Hubbard quite a bit from the pickup perspective, but I will be aggressive getting Tim Patrick in places that he's not rostered. And honestly, in most leagues, I do already have Tim Patrick, but in any other situation, I think I like him a lot. Am I being too aggressive though?
No, I think that Tim Patrick is a legitimate NFL wide receiver. And I think that we have that sweet spot, that window, almost like what we were saying about Chuba Hubbard, where the star is going to be out for, at least a couple more weeks, but potentially like over a month more. I think we see something similar to that with Patrick, where he's only competing with Cortland Sutton. So that's 2 just kind of stud red zone guys that the Broncos are able to roll out there. And, last year, I don't know how much more convincing you need after Patrick was able to go for almost 10 yards a target, over 80 targets with Drew Lock as his main quarterback. Like, that is impressive stuff. So, I think that he's someone that should definitely, I thought during the offseason, the Broncos probably could have gotten a decent trade for him, but now I know for a fact that they're glad they hung on to him.
Yeah, I wish the Packers would have been more aggressive getting any other wide receivers than Randall Cobb. Not bitter whatsoever as a fan. Let's also talk about Bryan Edwards a little bit more too. Actually, Julie has a great question. Ruggs, Waller, Renfro are all ahead of Edwards in the pecking order, not to mention Drake when he comes back or actually does stuff, and Josh Jacobs too. So how is Edwards rosterable at the moment? I think first to mention this, I'm assuming 12 to 14 team leagues, that's where Edwards is. In a 10-team league, as much as I like Edwards and I know you like him more, that's probably not enough work rate for him to be a guy that you even want to have on your bench. However, the Raiders have the league's top offense, or right close to it. They're passing 300+ yards a game. I don't see how that changes, mainly because I don't think Josh Jacobs is that good. And they're not using Kenny Drake and Peyton Barber at all. That defense also isn't very good. There's a lot of yardage that's going to be in play. And while Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow and Henry Ruggs, when he's catching deep passes, can all soak up some of that value, there is going to be opportunity for Edwards, even as wide receiver 4. I think of the Packers offense when it was really good, and you have top of those guys really working. The Chiefs offense at sometimes too, 4 different guys can be fantasy, relevant. Rams as well too, right? Woods, Higbee. You got any running back that might be getting yardage total, and then you have Kupp, who's doing great things. And if an offense is good, I forgot the Buccaneers as well. Then there's going to be a lot of yardage. I mean, that's fair, right?
I mean, yes, and Waller is obviously the alpha of this offense and this passing game, and Henry Ruggs has come on pretty nicely. I mean, obviously getting 19 targets through the first 3 games, 7 in each of the last 2 weeks. That's strong. I just think that Edwards, his per target production has outshined them so far, and Renfro, it seems like he's not going away for better or for worse. I think he's actually done extremely well for the record. But Ruggs is definitely a problem. So I worry less about the talent when it comes to Edwards, and more about just him being the number 4 option, and that I think is going to start to take its toll. I don't think that you're going to see him be able to continue to be 15 plus yards per target level of efficiency. That's just extremely hard to do over the course of an entire season, unless you're only getting 4 or 5 targets a game, which seems to be the case for him right now. So Edwards is someone that it feels like you're just sitting on a lottery ticket, but it might be a losing lottery ticket. Like, you can definitely see what the upside looks like, but you just feel what the surrounding realities are. You see that Waller is going to absorb well into 100 targets. You see that Renfro's trending towards that, and you see that for former first-round pick from 2 years ago, from 2020, Henry Ruggs is actually starting to show some promise. I think that the Raiders are going to keep going to that and seeing how far that goes. So it's frustrating thus far how well the two other guys, Renfro and Ruggs, have kind of progressed this year, because Edwards has been great on a per target basis, but I just think that we see a pretty significant target ceiling for him.
Okay. Real quick, because I know you're lower on Kadarius Toney than maybe most people are going to see. Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton really banged up in that Falcons win. I forget. I don't even care. It's Giants Falcons. It doesn't matter. But Kadarius Toney going to be a factor offensively, and you're saying more so, I got to see it first before I'm really going to be investing that. Even as a first-round pick that Toney was, you're not buying the hype that could be the Giants forcing him from an offensive perspective?
I just think that it was such a disastrous offseason for him, right? And you can only penalize him so much for that. Now that we're almost into October, we'll be into October when he suits up on Sunday. But for whatever talent Toney has, I think that he's just a little bit limited right now. I don't think he ran much of a route tree at all at Florida. It was all just kind of predicated on them just getting the ball in his hands and letting him go from there. And I think that can work in the NFL. I don't know how much the Giants want to make that a part of their offense, a staple of their offense, and how much they would have to kind of reconfigure things in order to make that be a reality, given the Galladay and the Shepard stuff right now. So do they want to just kind of invert things and just go really short not Galladay, I'm sorry, Shepard and Slayton. So I envision Toney getting snaps here. He got 42 snaps on Sunday and still only drew 3 targets, even with the injuries befalling some of those other Giants guys. So, I don't know if you'll have the luxury of waiting a week. I think someone will probably go ahead and scoop him just because of the injury context with this team right now at the receiver position. But I could see him getting scooped, doing nothing this weekend, and then being on the waiver wire when you do this pod again next week.
You don't believe that Jason Garrett has seen the light? Jet sweeps are the new thing. Haven't you watched the Packers and 49ers? Jason Garrett's been sitting there on those primetime television games like, that's what I've been missing in my offense. Just motioning someone right to left and handing the ball. This is perfect. I think Jason Garrett seems like the perfect candidate to go ahead and completely change his offensive philosophy. And Mr. Coach himself will absolutely incorporate Kadarius Toney on space-moving targets.
Of
I
course.
that's
Totally.
For sure. I say all that in jest. I actually think I might be going in on Toney. Like, I don't know. I know you did at least one beat John McKechnie, the RotoWire NFFC championship type of caliber thing. And I could see him being available in those formats. I'd have to check at least from a roster rate if that is the case. I'll take him there. Like, I think in a deeper roster league, it is 12 teams. I think you have 10 people on the bench. That's okay with me. And if in fact Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton are out for an extended time, or if the Giants do want to force feed a guy who was their first round pick to justify that, what many people thought was a bit of a high selection as is, we could benefit that from a fantasy perspective. Am I going high in that? No. I mean, we talked about Tim Patrick, obviously Chuba Hubbard, I'm going to be in on too. Brian Edwards, I'd much rather roster as well. I think it's probably, Toney is like 4 or 5, and that's not even getting to the tight ends too. And I think there actually is value at tight end this week as well. So that being said, it's more of a shallower bid. I think it's going to be, at least for me, and you can weigh in as well, John. I think I'll be bidding on him to the point where I want to get him. It's not just to make sure somebody actually is doing this, like a safe bet. But even still, I'm not going more than 7 or 8% of my budget. And if that's the case, fine. Somebody else is just going to be overpaying for him.
You know what first round receiver I might go for instead?
Yes.
Try to get ahead of things.
Ravens fan?
Rashad Bateman.
Yes. I like it. You were upset with Marquise Brown. That's what it was.
When am I not? The guy is like so fun to watch, and then he just does things like that so now he's Marquise Brown. He's no longer Hollywood Brown, but yeah, I mean, Bateman is practicing this week. Sammy Watkins and Marquise Brown, I think, are kind of non-negotiables in this offense, but I think Bateman can be that solid third receiver. Duvernay, he's out there, he's playing. I don't think that Duvernay is just a guy necessarily, but Bateman's a first-round talent, and I think that Bateman, provided that he's able to get up to speed, I think that he's a guy that you want to get in a week early. So if you have the stomach for it, if you have the bench space available, maybe scoop Bateman on the cheap this week before he's going for closer to 10% budget type of acquisitions here in a week or two once we start hearing that he's almost ready to come back.
I like that call quite a bit. I have far too many Devon Duvernay rookie cards to the hope that I would love for him to pop off, but I think Bateman's going to be an interesting case. He is going to be practicing this week. Obviously, he's on IR right now, but he would be eligible to return this week if he's deemed healthy. I don't envision a scenario where he's going to get a lot of workload right from the get-go, even with the struggles that some of those pass catchers in Baltimore have had. That being said, the potential is there. And, I think you guys, both you and Mario, were really high on Bateman and thought he certainly should be drafted over Tony, and was maybe more of he fell to that point in the draft for the Ravens to scoop him up. I really like him as well too. I like Tyler Johnson, and then I also like Rashad Bateman. So maybe I should just be a Minnesota fan at the back.
Yeah, geez, go for it over here. Dang.
Either way. Okay, so last one, at least AJ Green obviously looked okay with DeAndre Hopkins out. That was a vintage AJ Green if I've ever seen one before. And much like how we are dissing on Peyton Barber, I'll be willing to go on whatever podcast you have and say AJ Green is not going to have that good of a performance again. I think he is more or less done in his career. Thanks for throwing out the vintage performance on everyone's bench, though, AJ Green. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I certainly could have used it. I think I have him in one or two leagues where, I definitely had some flops at receiver. So that was a bummer for sure. But I'm not so ready to write off AJ Green just yet, man.
Okay. All right.
I think that he's definitely, if you're churning that bottom of your receiver core, why not see if lightning can strike twice? And, who's to say that Kirk or Rondale Moore especially are going to be able to stay healthy for the entirety of the season. So I think AJ Green's worth a kicking of the tires. Obviously, Hopkins is the guy that's going to be absorbing a huge percentage of the targets there in Arizona. But I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if AJ Green is like a serviceable, cracks somewhere in the top 50 receivers by the time that the season's over.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, we'll agree to disagree. Well, I mean, top 50, that doesn't take a lot. So maybe I can buy that idea. But I just don't know. I guess if Hopkins is out, maybe you could feel more confident starting Green after seeing what we saw this past week. But Hopkins normally is a pretty healthy guy. Obviously didn't practice all week, was still out there. I trust his talent and his health and knowing what his body needs more than most other wide receivers. So I think that's where I get a little bit wary. We probably have 10 more minutes left of the show, so I don't want to spend too much more time talking wide receivers, especially because I've been teasing tight ends so much, and the fact that there might be a few that are worth picking up. Before we get there, though, let's get a word from our sponsors, Vivid Seats. Preseason football is wrapped up, and we're obviously starting the regular season right now. Live events are making a comeback, and there's no better place to be than Vivid Seats to get back into the action. Grab your NFL tickets and cheer on your favorite team from the stands. That does really feel great to say. Even better, they just launched a new and improved rewards program with free tickets for every fan. Earn rewards, ticket upgrades, and perks just for shopping. If you're looking for tickets to the game, your favorite artist, or that new show everyone's talking about, Vivid Seats has it all. Visit Vivid Seats or download the app today. Vivid Seats. Experience it live. Okay, the only reason the tight ends really became what they were was actually a Monday evening trade that occurred between two teams that everyone really cares about a lot, Jacksonville and the Panthers, right? So Dan Arnold, who was actually a previous Week 2 Waiver Wire podcast name mentioned, now goes over to a team that actually desperately needs tight end. Obviously, Urban Meyer, bad. We don't like Urban Meyer. We think he's very bad for fantasy football. And Joe's very upset at him in particular. But maybe Urban Meyer really likes a fast guy who can catch passes like Dan Arnold. So there's that. On the other side of things, the Panthers moved Dan Arnold, who was their primary pass-catching tight end option, because evidently, I don't know if it was reported or if we're making inferences, Mr. Tommy Tremble himself, the third-round pick who was only supposed to be a blocking specialist, has possibly emerged as a fantasy-relevant option in the Panthers offense. They obviously have Ian Thomas, who was at one point a staple of the Waiver Wire podcast last year. I think Tommy Tremble and Dan Arnold are both relevant pickups, especially if you are dealing with that quagmire of tight ends 8 through 14. But am I crazy in assuming that?
I'd like to hear the Dan Arnold case. There seems to be a hive out there for him, and I've never quite picked up on it. But I'm not saying he's bad or anything. But what is the case for him exactly in your mind?
Urban Meyer is stupid, and Urban Meyer will make bad choices. A bad choice is using a tight end when you have many other capable wide receivers like Jacksonville does. He clearly needed a tight end. In fact, we saw James O'Shaughnessy do things relevantly in week 1 before he got placed on IR for Jacksonville. And whether or not that was Trevor Lawrence checking things down, or if that was literally all Urban Meyer can construct from an offensive perspective, there you go. I think Dan Arnold is a capable enough pass catcher. And I think from a speed perspective, which is all Urban Meyer knows from a roster, other than I like that guy. I knew him in college, Carlos Hyde. I like that. That's it for me. So that's enough. I think that's enough from a low end tight end 1, maybe a tight end 2 if you're in those double tight end leagues out there. That makes sense to me. But in those situations, Dan Arnold's probably rostered. So in a 10-team format, maybe even 12-team, I'm not really considering him, but I'm definitely keeping my eye on him. And if I have a deeper bench, I will gladly put down 5 or 6% of my budget to make sure I have him in the case that Urban Meyer is bad and things work out for Dan Arnold.
Well, I mean, crazier things have happened, right? I don't know, man. I don't know one way or the other. And it's, him being on the Jaguars only makes things a little bit tougher to see one way or the other. And it doesn't feel like Urban loves using the tight end, but then again, they just traded for him. So who knows really? And then, when it comes to Tremble was like the guy that I thought of this tight end class, which was not good. I mean, other than Pitts and Freiermuth, a couple tiers down, but still the second tight end in this class is like Tremble. He's obviously like a bad, on the football field. Like that guy will absolutely rattle your teeth. But I just didn't feel like he was polished enough to really be on the fantasy radar, especially as a rookie. But I think that this is telling from the Panthers that they were willing to move off of a guy in Dan Arnold that they just acquired this offseason. So that's a bit of faith. I mean, they ran a play for Tremble at the goal line on Thursday night, and he punched it in for a touchdown. Had a 30-yard reception on top of it. I kind of think the Tremble would draw some interest, especially if you're in a 2 tight end league, anything like that, or something with some deeper rosters. Maybe he's someone who will start to get a little bit more mainstream traction a week from now. He's definitely like more of a deep cut type of guy, but he's definitely, I'm glad that we're throwing his name out there because I think that he could be something that helps people down the road this season.
We're at the near hour mark of the show. If for no other reason than rostering Tommy from a fantasy perspective, do it because you can do some fun fantasy names. This is coming from a guy that probably in 10 of my 15 leagues, I'm just Joe. That's literally my team name is just Joe. So I don't care, but more creative people out there might think, hey, Tommy Tremble, this is fantastic. I can go ahead and do some fun things with that. But I do think, especially in a Panthers offense that looks pretty good, has a really good rest of season schedule, I think from an offense perspective, or at least scoring offensively, I like Tremble again. If you are in need of a tight end and really getting frustrated with the Jasickis and Tunyons and whatever else you're dealing with at the bottom end, that's at least a name worth mentioning. Tyler Conklin also, I think he's a thing at this point. With Irv Smith out now for the year, obviously was to start the year. Tyler Conklin, 126 yards, a touchdown through 3 weeks, and the Vikings have a pretty good offense, not good defense, pretty good offense. And maybe Tyler Conklin is another one that you want to consider as a low end tight end 1 for future season or future weeks.
Yeah, that was a nice little dart throw in the fishbowl for me. So I got to fire up some Conklin here.
Let's rank these tight ends because we mentioned Dalton Schultz at the top of the hours, obviously with the Cowboys winning. Tommy Tremble, Dan Arnold, Conklin. Sounds like Arnold's lowest for you, but where does Tremble fit in relation to those other 2 guys?
Tremble would be above Arnold, but below Conklin and below Schultz.
Okay. I think I'm going to have Tremble number 1 as well. And then I'll put Dan Arnold. I actually think Conklin's my number 2, then Arnold, then Schultz. I really don't care about Schultz whatsoever.
Right.
The 6th or 7th passing option the Cowboys might matter, but good luck guessing each and every week when that might be the case. Let's quickly touch on streaming defenses. There was obviously a lot more last week. This one, not so much. I think Titans against the Jets and poor Zach Wilson and how bad he's looked this season are probably the top pickups, but the Titans defense has also been miserably bad. I don't know. Like, I think I'll go ahead and play the Titans, hoping I'm going to get some picks and sacks because with Becton gone for the Jets, that's been not a very good offensive line, but it's not as obviously layup-y as we've had some past weeks for streaming defenses.
No. So, I mean, if the Titans are still out there, then obviously you want to go ahead and scoop them for their matchup against the Jets. I'm considering making that move in a league where I invested more than I care to in the Washington football team's defense. So yeah, that's looking like a huge mistake. I have them in a lot of spots, so I don't know what the deal is there, but no bueno. So picking the Titans up this week to just maybe not give me a negative against the Jets.
You could also consider starting the Cincinnati Bengals against the poorly coached Urban Meyer team, because that's our newest streamer against Jacksonville this week. It is a Thursday night football game too, so we are treated with this glorious match between the Bengals and Jaguars. We saw the Panthers defense do pretty effectively in a similarly bad matchup last Thursday against the Texans, but I think this week it's going to be a little bit more challenging to really confidently rely on the Bengals defense, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and we got the Thursday night weirdness on top of it. It's that game is going to be a beautiful disaster.
Yeah, hopefully fantasy goodness for my guy Trevor Lawrence, because if nothing happens this week, I'm dropping him everywhere, crying a whole bunch, and then admitting I'm wrong on Twitter, which is normally how my Sunday afternoons go anyway. So I guess I'll save it for Friday. This is perfect. That does it for us. That does it for us. The Tuesday edition of the RotoWire NFL podcast, sponsored by WynnBET. John, thank you so much for stepping in for Jake today. We've been getting a lot of questions in the comment section about lineups and trades and everything else like that. I'll direct them all to you. What's your Twitter account? Can you all send them to John? Get all the questions answered there.
No.
This is perfect, John. You're great at those things.
Okay, Joe.
You have to. You have to at least tell the people where they can find you on Twitter if they do want you to answer those questions.
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Johns_tailgate. That's JOHNS_tailgate. So find me over there if you want some questions answered that Joe doesn't get to.
Exactly. And you can find me at JB Fantasy Sports. We'll be back again next Tuesday. Hopefully Jake will be joining us. And I know if you also wanted to send Jake some fantasy questions, if he's got his personal matters taken care of, he'll be glad to answer them at Roto Jake. He's a huge lineup decision roster manager himself as well too. So thanks everyone for listening. And again, we'll be back next week.